We are back with another podcast episode. This is the Hockey Hacks podcast. I am Mason Hackle. This is the podcast dedicated to studying the best athletes in the world, the best hockey players in the world, and just the best in general. And I'm actually going to talk about something that is general today because I'm going to talk about the principle behind studies. You may have noticed in the vast majority of my posts that I very rarely, if ever, if I have, reference studies. That I actually just reference other people or stuff that I'm trying out or stuff that other people have tried out or things that I've seen from other people presenting stuff. And I was in what prompted me to think about this even deeper. And what was that? It was actually around my recent hip video where I was talking about Logan Couture's osteitis pubis or whatever the diagnosis is. I don't even know what it means because it just seems like hip inflammation in the specific like hip capsule, pubic abdomen area. Maybe there's a tear, maybe there's something and it's being felt in other places. Like, I don't know. The little bit that I looked at around the specific condition doesn't seem to add up for me and how I've been able to move past said conditions with my training and with helping out other people's certain conditions and what I've seen happen with, just the strength training that I promote or the ability training, let's say, that I promote and that people like Ben Patrick promote with ATG. We're able to move past conditions, and conditions are actually very related to this concept where like that I don't reference studies. I don't reference studies at all. I don't bother with going super deep into different diagnosis and things like that. And someone responded to me in the direct messaging, thankfully, because that's in my opinion, the most appropriate way to do that. And he was educating me on that. Hey, there's actually more that's going on with this osteitis pubis stuff, and like you're actually misrepresenting what the condition is actually doing. To which I said, it's just a matter of ability. We don't know what is happening with Logan Couture specifically. I don't, because I haven't seen his movement, which is kind of a lie. I've actually watched him as he's been progressing. Like, I saw a couple practices of him when I was back in San Jose, back in December of 2023, when he was in the middle of this rehab. If I had I'm not going to, this isn't a specific thing. It's just kind of subjective and, like all of that. I didn't think he was moving that bad. I didn't know what the actual injury was until it came out, fucking 6 months after it happened or so. He's been on like coming back from it and, like having to, all these different setbacks and stuff like that. And I keep seeing these comments of people saying like, yeah, that's not an injury that you come back from. But it's like, well, how did it start out to begin with? And so like to bring it back, this is why I don't get into studying. This is why I don't get into diagnosing. I just train off the ability of the specific individual, the specific person. If they can do certain movements, then that's going to wipe out any condition whatsoever that they're going to have. 95% of the time, this is the case. The vast majority of the time, people are okay. And that you can use the specific strength training that I promote, or that people like that you see from ATG promote, and conditions will go away. If you even just train the specific area that's weak, whatever condition that comes up will go away. eventually. And that, how that relates to some of this studying stuff, I'll bring up a couple of these points. And Ben Patrick is open about this as well. There are no studies done on his HEG split squat. There are no studies done on his tibialis raise. There are no studies done on the seated good morning related to back pain. Yet, all this time, the reason that he has gotten so popular as a public figure, as a social media expert, which, by the way, fucking stupid to call him that it's just someone on social media that doesn't have a doctor. Fuck that. It doesn't matter. The guy fixed his knees from legitimate pains that other people were saying had, could see the same thing out of him. Clinically diagnosed with a bunch of these different knee conditions and torn ligaments and tendons and other bullshit that went on with him. And yet he's made this transformation, overcoming all of these said conditions. There's no study on him, except for the fact that the anecdote that he presents of himself is the fucking study. But then you say, okay, that's one case out of however many people are on the planet. You don't fucking ignore that, because he's then made, what does he have now? Like 2,500 of what he calls knee success stories, which that's technically a marketing term. But I will tell you this, from having insider information, hundreds of thousands of people have signed up for the HEG online coaching system and have fixed various conditions by going through that. Not to mention all of the other coaches who are in this network who have also seen a bunch of shit and helped people out of that specific shit, who have seen these specific conditions and gotten people out of these specific conditions. And then you say, oh, there's no studies on all this stuff. How do you know that it actually works and that it actually happens? The proof is in you being told that you have the specific condition, and then they eliminate the condition. Like, what else do you need to know? That's the network that I'm with. These are people who do not need studies from the likes of Harvard, the likes of Mayo Clinic, the likes of Cleveland, I don't know, a bunch of these other medical, PubMed, maybe. Even though, like, that has a study from 2013 suggesting that deep squats were actually not, not harmful and not something that we should fear. That was actually helpful in strengthening the joints around the knee specifically. Like, what's the science that you're looking for exactly? Is it something that shows data which you don't even read, and that these other scientists don't even read? I'm going to name someone right now who doesn't fucking read his own studies, apparently. He just lists off the headline. I mean, you can name a bunch of other people like that as well, I'm sure. Like, who actually goes in depth into the study? Okay. If you're actually going in depth into the study, you're going to know what was looked at. If it was like, I don't know, there's these other terms like randomized controlled trial or some term that starts with, I'm sorry that I'm forgetting the term of it, but it's like you're looking at vast general populations, or you're having specific interventions in the specific studies, like interventional trials, or a bunch of other terms that I'm blanking on at the moment, because clearly I don't look at studies and I don't fucking care about them. But you have these different study types, and then people question what their credibility is, because they're trying to find out if it's repeatable. But do you really need, like, academic or doctor credentials to think about studies like that, or specific cases like that, case studies, situations of that like. In my opinion, you don't. Otherwise, I'd be referencing them. If I found that studies had a use to them, I would be referencing them all the fucking time. As you can see with all my content, I don't mention fucking anything about them. I don't need to. I just give my case study, and then I reference other people with the same case study. And by the way, if you get maybe like 10 anecdotes, you still have an anecdote. 100? 1,000? 10,000? 100,000? Like what's the limit threshold for people who have the same exact anecdotes? If people have the same exact anecdotes, is that really an anecdote anymore? Or is that something else? If you get people with a milk called Jordan Peterson, if you get the same people, if you get 1,000 people or 10,000 people with the same exact anecdote, you no longer have an anecdote. You have a hypothesis. Who in their right mind has like studies like that actually have the repeatable process there? Not to mention there's millions of studies that come out and millions of them conflict with each other. Like, how do you know if that's actually true? You have people questioning studies all the time anyway. You have no idea what the hell is true or not. Because studies are just information. What does information tell you to fucking do in this world? At the end of the day, you're still going to have to do some trial and error. You're still going to have to sling some shit at the wall. No study in history is going to tell you how to do that. You actually have to do that. The question is the answer. How do I sling shit at the wall? You fucking sling shit at the wall. You have to find out. I didn't listen to any power skating studies because I found out they weren't working for me. My friends at Train 2.0 Hockey don't have any studies to back up their claims. But I found out that they were using a much more effective method, using science-based practices, the practice of science, to back up their proof, which actually is more credible than something that is just written up in a fucking paper. And logged into a textbook that gets shelved away in a university and stays there for 20, 30, 40, 100 years. And has no updating software or anything like that revises anything with it. Because people discover new shit all the time. Maybe. Or you just have people making modifications to existing studies. Because that is actually how science fucking works. You have to adapt. You have to adjust. Just because a study says something that maybe contradicts. Just because a study says something and then you observe something else that contradicts with the study does not mean that the thing that you observe is wrong. Necessarily. It could mean, just like with these people who say, like, you have to look at how the study was studied. You have to see how it was done. Because if it was done with some kind of bias, well, maybe you have to scrap it. Like, a lot of it. Absorb what's useful, discard what's useless, add what's uniquely your own. The Bruce Lee principle. which actually is the best way to come about and act upon this day and age where information is rampant everywhere. Again, studies are information. They don't tell you how to do anything. The how is in you. The actionable is in you. It is not based off a fucking study. Studies don't tell you what to do. They just tell you things that happen. With some bias or without some bias. But there's always going to be some type of bias with any information that you get or any anecdote that you get. Whatever. It's your job to siphon through it. I find that an animal-based meat, fruit, honey, raw dairy diet works for me. I find that eating vegetables does not work for me. I find that over-consuming milk makes me feel bloated or any type of dairy like that. But I also find that it can be pretty addicting. I find that I always feel better with meat as the base of my diet. I find that when I do these specific movements that you're seeing from me, certain pains in certain areas of my body go away. I find that when I walk backwards or do the exercises that I do, that I gain more muscle in my specific way. I find that when I add specific supplements, mind you, that are clean, that it's easier for me to have more energy and also to grow muscle. But I also find that if I don't get any sleep, it's much harder for me to work out and also harder for me to get muscle. Some studies back up that claim. But I didn't go off of the fucking studies to determine whether I felt good or not with my sleep and with my workout. I had to go fucking work out. I had to go fucking sleep. I had to, go execute these movements. I had to go find out still, regardless of what any study says. And that's why I don't use them. Then with this hockey stuff, same exact process. Do you practice science or do you obey science? With hockey, I just use the movement science method, which basically means, did it feel good and did it look good? Did it match up with this NHLer's movement? And by the way, coaches are missing that step big time. I'll look at their movement of these, top-end coaches, especially on the social media end, and just any coach in general, actually. Aside from the people who I work with and who are in my network, who don't follow that process. They try to. They definitely try to. But they're stuck with the old power skating studies. They don't actually test it on themselves. This is what the textbook says. That's what they always say. That's someone who doesn't test it out for themselves to find out the fucking truth. They're missing a habit that these great players have. Great players want to seek the fucking truth. Good players just listen to their coach, and then bad players, what happens with them. Coaches, exactly the same fucking way. They don't practice the movement science method and are stuck in these this is what the science and textbook says. That's just a mediocre coach. You have a coach who says hey, I tried out this movement pattern. I tried out these mechanics. This is what I found out. This is how I was moving before. This is the difference between now and then. What do you notice too? Let's see if it happens with you. Which, by the way, is my exact coaching style. Whether you're in person with me doing, traditional ability training, or you're in person with me doing hockey training, or you're online with me doing hockey training. That's my way of coaching. And that's what creates transformations. That's the habits of the best coaches. Which is, by the way, what this podcast is all about. That's what Hockey Hacks is all about. That's what my other company, Ability Training, is all about. We want the best in everything. And we don't get caught in fucking studies because that doesn't express the best of human athletic potential and human ability. I want to thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. Remember, are you obeying the science, or are you going to practice the science? If science by definition is a never-ending process, we have to constantly adapt. You can't get stuck on the past.